Okay. Functional programming is scrutiny. I'm just going to do a brain dump. Lay my head on my pillow, close my eyes, and give my dissertation on functional programming is scrutiny. What do I mean by that? Functional programming is scrutiny. I just I just pushed or committed a couple updates to Nikeza Mobile, or should I say my Nikeza project, specifically the mobile application. And Nikeza was a project that I spearheaded with the Lambda cartel before it fizzled, in which we were to demonstrate and document our journey of building uh, really a functional, or let me start over, document our journey of building an application using functional first technologies from the client to the server. And so I just like killed like 2 hours writing some code for the mobile piece of the application because I got bored with the web application part, which was implemented in Elm. There's some performance bottlenecks I still need to handle, but I don't like web development. Anyways, talking about functional programming is scrutiny. There's some major considerations that I've been, I don't know, that I've recognized as I continue this campaign, this saga of being the best developer in the state of Florida, right? And specifically, really trying to like update my arsenal of options given a problem domain, translated helping a company automate their problems away with the least amount of maintenance required. This functional programming gets scrutiny. Well, what I've noticed is unlike object oriented programming, object oriented programming can be chaotic. Why? Because the idiomatic method of constructing an object oriented solution is purely based on relying on statements of code, which ultimately distills down into side effects. So the majority of your solution, the majority of the code that you write is dependent on side effects that you need to remember to account for, that you need to remember to handle. And I equate side effects as something that can be loosely coupled to randomness. The side effect of doing this could be that or this. And if you ever watch like primetime TV, it doesn't even have to be primetime. If you just watch programming via the television, because that's essentially what it is, especially during the daytime, where most older folks are going to be tuned in to Matlock and Perry Mason and Heat of the Night. I don't even know if those shows still come on. You'll see hella commercials targeted towards old folks that can't control their bladders, or they have diabetes, or they need blood thinner, whatever. And these commercials that are trying to sell these pills or medication, or really prescriptions, should I say, will always provide a disclaimer at the end of the various side effects that one could experience. And it's not definite, it's not a concrete number of when you take this medication, let me start over. When you take this medication, you will observe these specific side effects. It's you could experience blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now let me reel it back. Again, with object orientation, when it comes to software development, whether it's conscious or not, we are unhealthily reliant on side effects in which we must remember and account for all the different possibilities and also take into consideration the cascading effects of those side effects if they're not handled properly. Hence, we think about production and how, cascading side effects or a chain reaction usually destroys a system, right? Functional programming is scrutiny. So what does that mean? Well, with functional programming, my understanding is there's this term called total function. My understanding of a total function is that regardless of the input that is supplied to this function, it will always deterministically return an output. Always. A total function is, regardless of the input, it is guaranteed to return a repeatable output given the specific input. Functional programming is scrutiny, right? So why does this matter? It matters because in functional programming, it's not so much of executing arbitrary statements. Instead, it's more about chaining together individual functions via pipes, thus taking data and continuously transforming it, and then finally returning an output to whoever the client is. We're relying on functions that always return something that we need to or must account for. That's the difference between building a system that is reliant on functions, specifically deterministic, versus relying on a system that's dependent on side effects that you may or may not catch. With functions and functional programming, you're increasingly constrained to account and process whatever the result is. It's kind of enforced that you must take the result via a return value of a function and do what you want with it, but you need to do something with it in functional programming. But in object-oriented programming, you're not constrained to do anything. You're just executing arbitrary statements. And if you're disciplined as a developer, then you have a suite of automated tests that will provide some confidence that you're doing things right because you're building in accountability. You're behaving like an accountant. For every debit, there's a credit. For every credit, there's a debit. For every business requirement, there's an automated test. We're going to test the happy path. We're going to test the sad path. We're going to test our assumptions about a function. And we're going to receive exceptions about our assumptions. And then we're going to create or add more example-based tests based on those exceptions that were generated from our assumptions that we add into our regression, right? So functional programming is scrutiny. You have property-based testing that scrutinize your assumptions about what you believe a function will do given any arbitrary input. Functional programming is scrutiny. In the case of the mobile piece, you could go to like bizmonger/Nikeza on my GitHub. You'll see within all of my view models that I'm still like, it's still like work in progress, right? That I have like developed this notion of a query record and a side effects record, right? Because in building software, we're usually always querying and we're always requesting. Or hold up, let me start over. In building software, we're almost always querying and we're almost always dispatching commands. Those are the two main operations for any arbitrary application that's CRUD specific, which I'm now starting to steer away from CRUD and I'm starting to learn more about event sourcing. But given querying and side effects, with functional programming, based on the way you architect it, you're forced to deal with the responses. Now, even when you dispatch a command, that command, especially if you subscribe to domain-driven design, that command is ultimately going to enter into a workflow. That workflow is going to execute and it's going to spit out some events. We have separate handlers that those events can pipe into. And if there's pattern matches, for lack of a better expression, for any of those events, then those events can be handled. That may involve I/O. But the whole point is with functional programming, coupled with domain-driven design, we tend to, or that type of architecture, also coupled with the compiler, encourages, if not enforces, handling more cases than object-oriented programming, meaning that with taking into consideration event storming and applying the results of that exercise towards our handlers for side effects that are dependent on outputted events from our workflows that accept commands and again emits domain events, we're more likely to handle through functions a lot more cases. We're forced to think about and consider a lot more cases. Translated, functional programming is scrutiny. In functional programming, scrutinizing the results of operations is kind of encouraged more using that paradigm compared to object-oriented programming. And I'm just observing this, you know. I kind of like it. The thing is for people, for organizations that have not yet even experimented or built sample applications using this alternative paradigm for developing systems, they're not going to get it. They won't get it. They don't understand. Just like religion, whatever was preached to them from birth, that's what they accept. And they haven't yet developed the capacity to understand the drawbacks or the harmful effects of the way that they currently do things, or specifically the cage that they put themselves in, without really understanding some of the disadvantages or some of the extra effort that's required to accommodate other responsibilities that the software is designed for. With functional programming, it encourages scrutiny. Right? Functional programming is scrutiny. Total functions, you have to handle it, right? Or you're strongly encouraged to, at the minimum. And so there's a possible opportunity where I'm going to be hired for a large scale project as an architect. And there's going to be most stakeholders that are probably somewhat technical that as soon as they hear F sharp or Haskell or Elm or any functional programming language or related technology, they're going to automatically raise concerns. But their concerns are, even though it's focused on business concerns, their concerns aren't really based on investigation. It's instead based on fear or unfamiliarity. If they could appreciate or learn to appreciate what functional programming helps you catch, helps you consider via pattern matching, where the compiler is going to scream at you for a case that you missed, property-based testing, where the tool will actually expose to you why your assumptions are wrong about a given function. And the whole notion of transforming data, and if you subscribe to domain-driven design, having handlers that were derived from event storming, then these people that may be concerned will probably have a greater appreciation for a higher probability of getting most of the things right the first time. Functional programming encourages us to consider cases early on versus catching them later via side effects. And so that's just me just doing a brain dump and subconsciously training my mind so that whether I give a talk at a user group or conference, or I need to convince a stakeholder or another developer, the more I think out loud, the more I can go into autopilot, and the more fluid, congruent it becomes. And that's pretty much it. It's I definitely believe that when it comes to domain modeling, based on where we're at today, 2018, functional programming has way more advantages for catching issues and addressing more concerns than object-oriented programming. And people will never ever appreciate that until they start experiencing building these applications for themselves, which requires you to do it on your own time because most companies aren't going to pay for you to learn. Hence, they hired you because you told them that you're a professional software developer. So why are they going to pay you for them to teach you how to build better software? That's it. I'm out.